Thank you to the members of the media who joined us this morning, today, and to those of you who are also online and on the phones, I want to thank you as well. Before I get into the topic at hand, I'd like to introduce very key important personnel staff that I have named that will be very important to the completion of the behavioral health investigation. To my left is Carla Martinez, Chief of Staff of Operations for the Attorney General's Office, Sharon Pino, Senior Deputy of Criminal Affairs, Clara Moran, Director of Special Prosecutions, and Patricia Tucker, Deputy Director of the Medicaid Fraud and Elder Abuse Division. These four individuals will be playing critical roles in the behavioral health investigation and also the completion of this investigation in the nearing months. One of my first priorities upon taking office at the Attorney General's office was to direct a thorough review of the status of the behavioral health investigation in the Medicaid Fraud and Elder Abuse Division. The prior administration began this investigation as a result of a referral involving the 2013 June PCG report from HSD. At the completion of this review, I've been prompted to strengthen key areas and key elements necessary in the process needed to improve effective fraud investigations. It's my opinion today that this process into the behavioral health investigation has taken too long, and citizens deserve better at this point. The directives that I'll be implementing immediately are as follows. I will begin to immediately work with HSD to strengthen the initial referral process and include timely and more effective communication between the Attorney General's Office and HSD. Secondly, I will provide a more timely, agile, and responsive process to review initial allegations and investigate those allegations in compliance with state and federal law. And moving forward in the current behavioral health investigation, I am providing a following framework that will allow us to complete this investigation in the next 6 to 8 months. And finally, I've also additionally recommended a directive related to the initial referral of the PCG report, which will be recommending a release of that report to increase transparency and openness with key stakeholders. We're providing the media in attendance with discs containing the initial PCG report, and for everyone else, the audit will be posted on the Attorney General's Office website. I will tell you that in this review, we balanced public disclosure of the report and also redacted what we thought was important to maintain the integrity of the criminal investigation. There are minimal redactions in the audit, only intended to serve and protect the ongoing criminal investigation, and we are providing all the necessary information that we possibly can under both state and federal law, and solely to protect the integrity of the ongoing investigations. The minimal redactions concern the names and titles of targets, individuals of staff, patients, and dates of service, and the companies, of course, are included in the report, which are the 15 providers: YDI, Valencia Counseling Services, the Counseling Center, Team Builders, Southwest Counseling Center, Southern New Mexico Human Development, SOY, Presbyterian Medical Services, Pathways Partners in Wellness, Ogatis, Families and Youth, Easter Seals, Counseling Associates, and Border Area Mental. Now I'd like to give you a very brief update on the investigation involving these 15 providers. Investigations into 3 of the providers have been completed. Investigations into 4 other additional providers are ongoing, and investigations into the remaining 8 have yet to begin. Any criminal activity that we may find will be presented to a grand jury at the appropriate time. And previously it was projected, and I will remind members of the media, that it could take anywhere between 5 and 6.5 years. This was just simply unacceptable. In working with the Medicaid Fraud Unit and senior staff over the past few weeks, we have confirmed that we can move up this timeline with the infusion of about $1 million legislative request that would allow us to retain 11 employees, would retain $1 million appropriation from the Consumer Protection Fund, which would allow us to retain additional services and additional fraud employees to speed up this investigation. This money does not come from the general fund in the legislature. This would come from our Consumer Protection Fund, but we would need legislative approval, and we're asking for legislative support, and we're also asking support from the executive, including the governor's office, to support this appropriation to speed up the investigation. Let me, close by stating a couple positions that I'm very concerned with. New Mexico, moving forward, must learn how to attack waste, fraud, and abuse in a way that does not harm its own citizens. Clearly, from this case, we have learned where we need to do a better job, and quite frankly, there needs to be more fraud prevention at the executive level. There needs to be additional collaboration both with the state and federal authorities, and I've already reached out to the U.S. Attorney's Office and have begun discussions to improve collaboration among all authorities. And finally, there needs to be more transparency when targeting waste, fraud, and abuse. And I think that our decisions and our directives moving forward as a result of this review are an important step in the right direction. We hope to bring results in a timely manner and bring answers, yet not upend certain vulnerable populations when fighting waste, fraud, and abuse. And I will close with a personal case. It was the Jemez Mountain school embezzlement case in which we uncovered millions and millions of dollars of embezzlement and did not need to do that in secrecy, did not need to shut down the school, and did not need to shut down the operations in order to hold someone accountable. And my hope is that these reforms moving forward will bring greater accountability and bring answers to the legislature and the citizens that are demanding them. I'll take questions now at this time.
With the behavioral health and the mental health audits or the investigation, there were patients, that there were people, New Mexicans, who suffered as a result of the personal incentive?
At this point, I'm focused on trying to uncover waste, fraud, and abuse. I am concerned that the system I am concerned that there was a better way to attack waste, fraud, and abuse. And at this time, I'm going to withhold any other opinions because we're focused on completing the 8 investigations. But there clearly was a better way at fraud detection, a better way to refer information, and ultimately the Attorney General's office needs to be more timely in its investigations.
What was the third review that's been completed?
There is a provider that we've completed. I can't state who the provider is at this time. We're making a final determination on what the appropriate outcome is as a result of that investigation, but the third one has been completed, but I can't disclose at this time.
You can't say if there's fraud in that? Fraud?
I will be announcing the outcome of that third report in the coming weeks.
That's not the re-referral of Easter Seals?
No, that would be the Easter Seals is the second one.
So Easter Seals has been completed. We referred it back. That's all done. Twice, right? Is that right?
Yeah, I'll defer to my director here. She's got a more detailed answer.
So they've completed the investigation into Easter Seals on the other one?
We have completed the investigation into Easter Seals. We have not issued the second supplemental report, but the investigation has been completed.
It sounds like there was no fraud found.
And there was no fraud found.
And were there overbillings in that case?
The original conclusion of the first report remains consistent in the supplemental report.
Attorney General, can you name the 4 ongoing and the 8 not started so we can kind of like figure out where things stand?
I don't think I can at this time. I think there are certain tactics and approaches we'll be implementing as part of our changes as well, and I wouldn't want to inform the media before I inform those providers, so I'll withhold at this point.
Mr. Attorney General, your predecessor said that the investigation would be compromised by releasing the audit. What's changed, or what do you view differently in that regard?
Well, we focused on information that we think would be critical to our criminal investigation, and then erred on the side that if other information did not meet that standard, that it was then public record. And it's very common that audit reports are used to strengthen other decisions, that the audit report may be necessary to make funding decisions and administrative decisions involving these providers. So we had a very high standard. We didn't change the law in terms of the criminal exception, but it's my view that we made sure that the information we redacted was necessary to assist in the criminal investigation, and then the remaining was subject to IPRA.
Will any of this extend to you didn't mention the Arizona providers. They came in, got $24 million. We reported on some documents that show possibly questionable practices that they billed for. Will this eventually extend to them and the money they receive?
You know, one of the other conclusions that I've drawn very early in the administration is that New Mexico is well behind in Medicaid fraud detection, and we recently informed the legislature that we have over 384 referrals and active Medicaid fraud cases, which also added to, I believe, the delay in investigating these very critical cases. I'm putting it upon the executive and the legislature to also assist us with this systemic problem that we need additional resources to investigate these cases in a timely manner. You're referencing another potential matter, and so my directive to our administration is to follow up on these cases and to make sure that we hold officials and stewards of public funds accountable. So we are going to be putting pressure on some of these funding resources to better fund these operations and these investigations very soon. So you're referencing if there are allegations and potential deficiencies in the Medicaid fraud system, we will aggressively investigate those claims.
As an auditor, you would release the audit. Some media organizations did ask you to release the audit. Why now?
Well, there was a court order related to the auditor's office, so we had a slightly different analysis here as the Attorney General because we are controlling the criminal investigation.
Did your familiarity with those audits from the auditor's office in any way influence your decision to make this public?
No, those were very separate systems. I think, if anything, the only thing that has influenced my opinion on this matter is that also the state of New Mexico can improve its procurement and selection of fraud detection companies moving forward, and so we can also improve in that area. So the selection of PCG, hiring certified fraud examiners on contract, that it's my opinion that fraud detection services should also be hired subject to the procurement code, and but that's the only experience that I've generated as being former state auditor.
Is that different? Like, there's a professional service agreements basically, and there's procurement code. Is that what you're making the distinction?
What I'm saying is that what happened in North Carolina, and the legislature reviewed this question, that HSD should not be hiring fraud detection services by themselves, that a collaborative model is always better. It's always better to consult the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit, to consult with your inspector generals, to consult your U.S. attorney before you go out and hire private companies, that we can do a better job in hiring fraud detection professionals before you go out. And I think that led to a lot of controversy early on. So go ahead, Deborah.
Do you think your predecessor's office reviewed the these referrals sufficiently before accepting them?
That's a good question. I'm focused right now in establishing a dialogue with HSD. I spoke with the secretary last night to talk about improving the referral process because I'm concerned that there can be improvements made, and I think that's what you're inferring in terms of how this case was initially presented and referred may have caused some confusion because obviously it implements the suspension of funding and a lot of other consequential questions. So my directive is that we should never make these decisions in a vacuum no longer. That's a real top takeaway. As Attorney General, I'm willing to extend leadership and to make sure that HSD, fraud detection work together so that these decisions don't negatively impact the citizens of New Mexico.
Have you had any feedback from the governor's office on the the legislature, but also the governor's office on the $1 million to ramp this up and expedite this?
You know, I notified the executive yesterday of our proposal, and I'm seeking their support at this time.
I'm sorry, sir. In the interest of time, do other folks haven't asked the question yet? Or
The average New Mexican who is watching this, and this is a very complex issue, for the average person who is watching, what's the bottom line here? What's your message?
Well, my message is that there are bad actors stealing Medicaid funds from the most vulnerable populations, and New Mexico can do a much better job moving forward at weeding out those bad actors, and should never expose the healthcare systems that are supposed to also be providing service unnecessarily unless we can actually prove fraud. And so this is a very important time period for New Mexico in making sure that we keep our eye on the ball and go after bad actors.
How would you, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate, I know people have said we need a lot more health care, especially with the mentally ill. How would you rate that?
Well, these are vital services, and we have to do everything we can to protect these vital services. But we also need to make sure that in fighting fraud and corruption that we actually fight fraud and corruption in a very targeted and effective manner, and that we don't re-victimize the citizens of New Mexico.
Did you discuss with HSD the release of this of the audit?
I did.
What was their response?
I put them on notice that this was our position and that we would provide them any guidance and assistance that they needed, and they seemed supportive.
You mentioned that you could say it sort of with some, there are bad actors stealing funds from the most vulnerable. You mentioned that you've got a third out there that you're going to release. Is that a kind of a signal to us that there's some kind of determination that there's been some Medicaid fraud with that third investigation?
Are you talking about the third provider?
Yes.
No, I'm not. I'm actually saying please don't draw any inferences. What I'm putting it in proper perspective to the press is that we are dealing with very vulnerable populations that are at risk to being abused for waste from fraud and abuse, and that we are going to aggressively investigate that.
More of a general statement.
Yes.
Where do things need to improve from the HSD perspective? How much of this was complicated by their rush to refer this and not accept even so much as an audit response from these audited agencies? What role did that play?
I'll attack your question in one way. The three areas that I'm going to try to influence the legislature and HSD and also our own Mafuku unit are to really focus and improve on Medicaid fraud prevention. And this is where the audits and the training and the questions of due process and proper billing, and this is where all your question is focused. That New Mexico clearly can do a better job in Medicaid fraud prevention. The era of pay and chase is over, and I think that New Mexico is still kind of caught up in that let's pay the bill and then chase the fraud after. And I'm encouraging New Mexico, including HSD, to take a more proactive approach and try to prevent the fraud before it's occurring. And then secondly, obviously, to better invest in more collaboration, oversight. We're in the dark ages there. And of course, thirdly, where I'm focused is that we need to be very united on holding bad actors accountable and aggressive prosecutions and timely investigations, which is why, in terms of what I control, we have built a very aggressive team behind me. And I'm also directing the legislature and the executive to take a more active role in the systemic accountability of holding people accountable, which means if we have 384 cases and they need to better staff these operations, we're looking for their support, or also properly fund the timely investigations of $1 million. We're looking for their support at this time.
Are you in regular contact with the U.S. Attorney's Office on any of these investigations?
I actually met with the U.S. Attorney this morning, and we are now discussing creating a task force involving Medicaid fraud and trying to leverage resources. And so he was very open to that.
Sir, we just want to be respectful of everybody's time.
Okay.
13 and Associated Press, did you have anything before
Sorry.
we open up the phone lines? Okay.
Okay, just for the average New Mexican, when you're talking about aggressively prosecuting, I mean, what kind of repercussions could we see for companies or individuals, providers or individuals?
You wanted to give her a little briefing on the types of crimes and.
Sure. So, with respect to the types of cases that we handle in the Medicaid fraud unit, we handle situations in which caregivers commit timesheet fraud. We handle abuse and neglect cases in long-term care facilities. We handle provider fraud, and that can manifest in any number of ways. And then we also handle false claims cases. So all of those have separate types of repercussions for the community and for the providers. Does that?
There could be doctors that are billing for services that the client never received. You could even have, there could even be breakdowns where even doctors are illegally prescribing drugs that aren't needed for these vulnerable populations. So because you're talking about a substantial amount of dollars flowing down, you're talking about manipulating the primary health care services and mental health services in a way that there's no way that they can provide a check or a balance to scrutinize. That we're basically the only guard against ensuring that they're receiving those services adequately.
Right, I'm saying what kind of repercussions could they face if they are?
Oh, criminal penalties.
Yeah, criminal penalties. Exactly.
On federal and state.
I mean, there's a variety, obviously, for depending on the particular type of conduct and what's alleged. We would look at our criminal statutes and see in that particular case if criminal conduct has occurred, what charges should we proceed with, whether that's fraud, whether that's some of the other. There's a variety of charges that could come to bear in these types of cases.
And we also have civil remedies as well.
Okay.
All right, General, I'm going to just unmute this.
Okay.
All callers are muted.
Oh.
All callers are unmuted.
Hey, this is Joey Peters at the Santa Fe Reporter. My question is, you're asking the legislators for $1 million in funding. If you get that, to what extent will that speed up the time period of this investigation?
We're anticipating 6 to 8 months if the appropriation is approved.
It's 6 to 8 months.
Right, from 5.5 to 6 years to 6 to 8 months.
This is Dwayne Barbette with the Alamogordo Daily News. Have you started the investigation on the counseling center here in Alamogordo?
That's one of the investigations that has been completed.
it's one of them that's been completed. And are you disclosing right now where the next step is with that one?
My understanding is that
Is it going to a grand jury or?
the counseling center is involved in the administrative process right now through HSD.
We recommended no criminal.
I'm having trouble hearing you.
There was no criminal recommendation. She said that it's now in the civil process, probably for payment and reinstatement issues.
Okay, and how much are they going to owe? Do you know offhand?
We can.
They also have a pending district court case. Are you involved in that as well?
No, we just look at the potential criminal liabilities.
Okay. And do you know how much they're going to have to pay back or anything like that?
I think HSD is making that determination based on the outcome of their administrative hearing.
Okay.
And Dwayne, if you have this is James, if you have other follow-up questions, just shoot me an email. We'll get those to you.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
This is Diana Alba Solar with the Las Cruces Sun News. And I was just wanting to ask if there's anything that you could say regarding Southwest Center and Families and Youth Inc. They were two of the main providers here in Las Cruces that were affected by this audit.
Diana, all I can say is that they're ongoing at this time. Those have not. Both of those are. Neither of them have been cleared.
And you had mentioned also strengthening the communication and relationship between HSD and the AG's investigation into Medicaid fraud division. In what way are you talking about? What are some of the, practical steps that would be taken?
Well, for instance, I would like to better target risk and coordinate with HSD. For instance, site visits need to be increased. We need to discuss likely failures in terms of we would rather have some of their trends and failures of deviations and accountability rather than wait for a referral. We think that we can better target some of the risk areas and work with them and better determine what's overbilling and determine what is criminal rather than wait for a 15 entity referral that involves almost 90% of the behavioral health system.
All right, we've got time for maybe 2 more questions on the phone. Anybody else?
Justin Normand at the Santa Fe Reporter. Attorney General, you said the era of pay and chase is over. What role, in your mind, does a contractor like Optum Health have in preventing fraud and use?
They play a very important role, and there have been considerable reforms at the national level, and that is one of the discussion points I'm going to engage with HSD. At this point, I can tell you that the discussions of Optum and the new provider and the legislative oversight committees and HSD and even the AG's office have been confrontational and unhelpful to this point. And so I want to do my best to leverage them in improving accountability. So they play a very important role in the type of information that my Medicaid fraud unit receives, and it's my opinion that the information we have been receiving thus far is severely inadequate considering the amount of money that flows through their system.
Information that you guys have been receiving from Optum?
Right. In other words, we can assist them in better improving their referral process as well. They need to provide better information. One of the key elements that the federal government has improved on is the use of data and data analytics, and Optum is probably one of the entities that controlled most of the data. We have very little information on the receiving end, so the more data that HSD and Optum can provide, the more strategic our investigations can be, and more importantly, the quicker you can determine overbilling from criminal activity. And that's really the sad lesson that you quickly learn from this case, is that the right professionals on the front end of this case needed to quickly determine what was overbilling and what was worthy of a criminal investigation. And that's my opinion that this is the process that we're focused on right now.
Anybody else on the phone?
This is Sylvia from the Las Cruces Sun News. Mr. Bungo, can you just confirm that FYI and Southwest Counseling, they are active investigations that are not among the 8 that are still haven't been started yet?
They are among the investigations that have begun.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Any more questions?
I do have one. As it relates to the handling of MCOs, is kind of a spin-off to the Santa Fe reporter question. Are we going to learn anything from this that is released today about credibility of fraud and where the origins of these accusations were? Did they rest with Optum, and was there valid fraud found at all?
I don't want to make a determination on that. That's clearly HSD's role to weigh in on what the elements are necessary for credible allegation of fraud. I'll be available for questions after you review the report, I guess is my answer to that.
All right, guys, thank you very much. If you have any follow-up questions?